Okay, I think we're going to get started. Do I need the microphone, or can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So it's going to be a bit of a guessing game because some of our slides cut off, but I'll try and walk and talk you through it. It always sucks being in the technology field and tech doesn't work. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name's Kevin Klages. I am the co-founder of iGUIDE. And about 5 years ago, my co-founder and I developed a mapping technology that allows users to go into a space and collect visual and spatial data that we translate into floor plans, room measurements, floor area calculations, and now 3D tours. My background is in design and construction. My co-founder is a Russian physicist in the field of metrology and optics, so by virtue of the guy that could speak English, I'm the one that gets to give all these presentations. So we started in real estate probably about 4.5 years ago, primarily delivering the same tools that we had set out to deliver to the design and construction industry, which is floor plans, room measurements, floor area calculations, photo documentation, and we introduced the 3D tour aspect shortly after. Our value and our relevance to the real estate space is when you look at the time in which you deal with the built environment, which is buy-sell, you're essentially required to have the same tools that we do, which is floor plans, room dimensions, floor area calculations, and photo documentation. And why I'm here talking to you today is you're seeing a shift, not a change, but a shift in the information buyers want to see when they are searching for a home. They're looking for those sorts of tools. You're also seeing a shift among your associations wanting to improve the professionalism of the real estate industry by providing the buyers with the tools that they're looking for when they are searching for a home. Is anyone here familiar with the National Association of Realtor annual report, home buyer and seller report that they put out? If you get your hands on it, it's really helpful. But every year they interview about 250,000 people involved, buyers and sellers involved in the transaction. And we use that report when we entered the space, but essentially those 5 tools that buyers want to see when they're searching for a home are professional property photos. They're wanting property details, room dimensions, floor area calculations. The new entrance over the last 3 years has been floor plans. Number 4 is 3D property tour, and number 5 is neighborhood information. So what they're wanting to do is your association, as well as provincial level and federal level, and our company, we now, 5 years old, we're in the United States, we're in Australia, and we're in Germany, and we're working with local operators to help introduce these standards and this technology to your space. So what I'm going to talk about today is specifically related to square footage and room dimensions, because as I understand, this is going to become a requirement of listing with this board. We've seen it happen in Alberta, where the entire province has now mandated that information. There's a number of boards already in Ontario that we work with that have mandated it. This is designed to be a good thing for you, to really set you apart from any other way to sell a property. And again, it's your board's goal of increasing professional standards to introduce and require this information. I like to start out with a story. I've been told now that I'm doing speaking like this, it helps us relate. I did this presentation down at the Oakville Milton Real Estate Board probably a year ago. And 2 days after the presentation, I had a realtor who was at the presentation call me up in a panic. And she said, I've been in the industry for 27 years, never had a problem. But she just sold a 4,500 square foot house. It was about $2.2 million, about $500 a square foot. And she said, my entire career, I have listed my properties as 4,500 square feet of beautiful living space. Well, her first mistake was the home was sold to an engineer who went out and prepared his own floor plan. And as it turns out, she was selling him 4,000 square feet of beautiful living space and 500 square feet of wall. So he wanted a $250,000 price reduction during closing. Her question to me was, is this legitimate? And I said, well, did you call that 4,500 square feet living space? And the answer was yes. And then I said, it is a legitimate claim. And I said, what you want to do is you really want to minimize the impact of that. And so many times when I give this presentation to realtors at these various boards, everybody always goes to litigation. Like, oh, litigation, that's the thing to be worried about. But that's not really what you're trying to protect yourself from. You folks are here, you sell yourself on your reputation and your brand. Worse than litigation is the impact that'll have on your brand or your own professional reputation. Personally, coming from the Toronto condo market, you buy an existing condo from your realtor and you find out that builder plan is actually, it's in about 4 feet on either side, your furniture doesn't fit. I don't remember the builder, but I remember the realtor that screwed me on that home. It happens. And that is something that 22 years later, I still remember her name. And you tell that anecdotal story, and that happens in a community. So you want to really, when you're looking at this information, you're doing it to protect your reputation and your brand. So why is square footage important, other than what I talked about? Really, there's 3 reasons. Everybody knows that square footage is the foundation in determining value. Everything is a cost per square foot, whether it's for the buyer, yourselves, when the place was originally constructed, for your insurance company, for your financial company. Square footage is the basis for determining value. We don't see it here in Canada, but down in the US, they have this thing called an automated valuation model, where you can go online and find out the value of your home at any given time. They rely on square footage information. Square footage, and we met some of you out on the show floor today, it's all about comparing options. So here's a 3-bedroom, 1,100 square foot condo. Here's a 3-bedroom, 800 square foot condo. You can see the difference. Square footage is used for comparison. And then number 3 is planning spaces. So once you've got that buyer online and they maybe want to rip up the old carpet or they want to replace a tile, square footage is a number that is used for renovation, for construction, for everything else. So it really is used in planning the spaces. So when you look at its importance to you as a real estate professional, number 1, your buyers want it. So whether you're representing the listing or the seller or you're representing the buyer, we're in the sales space and it's all about giving the buyer what they want, and that's information we know definitively buyers want. We also know, and what I'm here to talk about today is helping you not only protect but enhance your personal brand by delivering this information and knowing what the information is that you're delivering. And number 3 is distinguishing yourself. It is, we have a lot of markets throughout Canada and the US where it is not mandated, yet consistently we see top performing agents and teams always providing floor plan, square footage, and floor area information, because it's a way of setting themselves apart from the pack. If the only thing you learn today is these 5 things, this is what you need to know to really protect yourself. You need to know what measurement you're giving. And it might seem silly to really distinguish between square feet and square meters. I don't know the makeup of the buyers in the Woodstock, Ingersoll area, but a lot of the markets we go into, they deal with foreign buyers. And everywhere other than North America, and it should be Canada too, everybody thinks in a metric format. So you might be talking 3,400 square feet, but that buyer might be thinking 3,400 square meters. And if you know measurement, it's a big difference. And I've heard of cases where that's happened, primarily in investment properties. But you need to know, are we talking square feet or talking square meters? And you need to really make that distinction. The one that we're going to spend most of our time talking about is, what is the space you're calculating? Are you giving an interior measurement or an interior calculation? Are you giving an exterior calculation? Or are you giving an occupied calculation? 3 ways that you as a realtor would be presenting square footage information, and it's really important to know the difference between those 3, in particular for the story I told you earlier. The other, number 3, is who measured the space. Where did you get the information from? Did you do it yourself? Are you taking your square footage from the builder? Are you taking it from property tax records? Are you taking it from a service provider? Each one of those people that provided that number probably did it at a different point in time in the life cycle of that property. So it's very important to know where that measurement came from. Number 4 is what tool was used. I know, coming from the world of quantity surveyor, my boss, an old English gentleman, back in the day when they would measure a property outside with a tape measure, they would actually take the temperature of that tape measure and factor in the expansion and contraction of that device when they're calculating the space. So tape measures, tape wheels, lasers, what did you use to calculate that space? And number 5, when was that measurement or when was that calculation taken? If all you know is those 5 things about that number, you're setting yourself up for protection. When we talk about, and I'll spend most of my time talking about, because this is really the sticking area, is what measurement are you giving? And there are 3 ways of communicating and calculating a square footage for a home. There's an interior area, an exterior area, and an occupied area. And we're going to go through each. Interior area or living space is essentially known as the some people call it paint to paint. So it is the inside of the home. So it's from that inside wall to that inside wall, against that inside wall to that inside wall. It is a space in which you occupy within the 4 walls. So that is living area, that is interior area. And you can see by the purple here that is the area that is deemed living area. It does not include balconies, it does not include porches, it does not include garages. It is really that interior occupied area. Exterior area. That is where you now include the wall. So in the case, as you're probably hearing down in California, where a lot of homes and properties are being destroyed, that exterior area, that footprint of the building is important because now they have to rebuild the whole thing. They need to know what that exterior area is. I'm assuming that Woodstock and Ingersoll is primarily single detached homes. So when you are selling a space, a single detached home, you're selling everything. You're not only selling the living space, but you're also selling the exterior walls. In the case that that building needs to be reconstructed, you need to know what area is consumed by wall. So exterior area is the entire footprint of the building. The third occupied area really only pertains to multi-unit family homes, so condominiums, townhouses, and it is the exact same as interior area, except that it only applies to your unit. So we call that behind the key area. So space that you as that condominium owner or that townhouse owner occupy. You could call interior area the entire footprint of that floor. So the builder is technically selling that entire floor off. But you as a condominium buyer are only purchasing that portion of the floor in which you occupy. And we'll get into a little bit more about the difference between occupied and interior. One of the big things, and does anyone here trade in towns or condominiums specifically? Are there any in this area? There's lots. As a company that provides square footage information, we're often questioned about our area calculations versus the builder's area calculations. And one of the things that you as realtors have to appreciate is there is a fundamental difference between what the builder is selling and what you're selling. And the easiest way I equate it is the builder is selling a recipe and you're selling the final product. So the builder is teaching you how to build or how to create the cake, but you're selling the cake itself. So the builder isn't necessarily selling exactly the way it's going to appear. They say, this is the floor plan of the home the way we think it's going to be, but all throughout that sales process, they're letting you know at every point that it may change during construction. It won't be exactly as it appears. The difference for you folks is you're selling something that exists, something that's there. So you don't have the same protection as what the builder would by selling an idea. You're selling a product. So when it comes to condominiums, the builder absolutely is selling the exterior walls and it's selling the living space. However, the builder has 2 buyers. It's got the condominium corporation for the exterior walls, and you've got the living space. So the builder can include those exterior walls in their numbers, whereas you're including only the living space that's contained within it, because as you know, those exterior walls and windows belong to the corporation, belong to the building. So oftentimes we'll get questioned about the difference. Everybody likes to give the bigger number, I get it. Just by knowing and explaining this is a number that I'm giving, again, it's a means of protecting yourself. And with condominiums, it's even more important because condominiums are generally smaller and the walls are generally thicker. A higher percentage of that unit is consumed by exterior walls. Therefore, you've got a higher portion of your cost per square foot that you're not actually selling and you can get challenged on. So that's why it's important to know. Like oftentimes condos might have 11 to 13 inch walls, whereas a single detached home might have 8. You just want to be careful which number it is that you're given. When we get into who measured the space, really there's 4 ways that you as realtors can go out and get square footage information and measurements. The one we hear about time and time again is builder floor plans. And I'm sure everybody here uses them if they're available. We're not saying not to use them. We think it's a bad idea. A lot of the standards organizations, I personally belong to the International Property Measurement Standards Organization out of Europe, and there's probably about 6 other standards that are commonly applied throughout North America. They disagree on a lot of things, kind of like real estate associations. But the one thing that they all consistently agree on is builder floor plans have no place in existing home real estate. It's a dangerous recipe for agents to use because a lot of them are not educated in what they're using it for. And that's where I'm here today saying if you decide to use one, know what it is you're using. Know that you're providing the recipe, you're not providing the product. That is a floor plan that the builder might have been using or the builder used to sell the home originally. I am not guaranteeing or I'm not saying that that is the home that is actually there. Does that make sense? The other one is property tax records, and the MPAC guys love us. Partially, and this is where I'll break into a bit of a history lesson. The way in which MPAC or most assessors measure a home is they do a perimeter walk on the main floor. That practice started in the 1940s by Freddie Mac down in the United States when the mortgage industry started. And they started to get flooded with all these mortgages. What they needed was a system for compartmentalizing and categorizing homes, categorizing these mortgages. So they went to the American National Standards Institute and said, can you help us come up with a way? So what they did was they came up with this exterior measurement. Back in the 50s, most homes were same 2 stories up and down. It was fairly easy. You do a perimeter walk, double it, there you go, now you've got the square footage, away you go. It was never meant to be an exact measurement of the space. It was never meant to be used as a square footage of the home. It was meant to be a way of compartmentalizing these numbers. Jump forward 70 years, the problem is that number is now available for every home in North America. So you as a real estate industry, now knowing that your buyers want to see that number, you started saying, can we get our hands on that? Even as far as 5 years ago, the likes of property assessors would say this number is not meant to be used as a square footage calculation. Then wait, what's that? You're willing to pay me $5 to give it to you? Sure, here you go. So they're now giving you that number. Now they have got disclaimer after disclaimer saying this isn't right, but here you go. So you want to be careful when you're using that MPAC number. When you look at, and I should have specified, the builder plan, those are called as-builds with a D, as-built floor plans. This is what it's going to look like once it is built. A service provider will provide you with an as-built with a T floor plan. So they will go out and they will measure the space. And when you look at a proper square footage calculation and a proper floor plan, there's only one way, one legally defensible way to build a floor plan, and that is from the inside out. So even what the property tax folks are doing is just by doing a perimeter walk on the first floor and then guesstimating what the second floor is, that's not a defensible square footage. A defensible square footage is going inside, mapping it, measuring it, calculating the area, and then you allow for that exterior wall. So you figure out what's the thickness of the exterior wall, and then you apply that. Now you have an actual square footage for that home. And that's what, if you hire an engineering firm, an architectural firm, or a quantity surveyor, or us, That is what they will all provide, or should provide. If they're not, I question it. The other way is to do it yourself, and that would even be far better alternative to using a public tax record or a builder plan. And that is where you go out and you measure and you create a floor plan of a home. Because the one ingredient that exists in both of these latter two is they do include a documented floor plan of the home as it was built. It's not as important to be accurate, and I'll jump in here to say everybody asks about accuracy. There's no such thing as accuracy when it comes to property measurement. There's how confident are you in your measurement. You know, you get 19 engineers to go out and measure a home and create a floor plan. 18 of them will be different and one copied. So they'll never all be the same. But what you're doing is you're providing a documentation of the space. And I always equate it back to grade 8 math class, where you get part marks for having the right answer and then part marks for showing your work. The floor plan is showing your work. You're explaining, this is how I created it. So now what you're doing is you're creating a conversation piece in case it's not completely bang on. You're saying, well, this is how I did it. This is how I added my space. These are my measurements. This is how it all goes. What I am going to tell you about and recommend everybody do, if only once, is go and measure and create a floor plan yourself. Who's actually gone out and done a floor plan by themselves, graph paper? Fantastic. As a professional realtor, everybody should at least practice that once. It's not only we hear it's really empowering to understand the construction and how these things are created, but it really provides you with a tremendous insight into the areas of a home. So we always say your homework for tonight is buy a graph paper, a pencil, and a ruler, and then go home and map your own house and go through that practice. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do it. Tools are easily a measuring tape, measuring wheel, laser distance measure, my product plug, iGUIDE camera system. How many of you own a laser distance measure? Realistically, that should be everybody in the room. Like, just in your car, you're going out on a listing presentation, you're going to a property. Always a good practice to just hit a couple walls and jot the measurement down. Now you've got, at the very least, a baseline measurement that you yourself have created. So you can even do that in listing presentation. I'm just going to hit a couple walls here really quick in case you call me, and I know I've got some baseline independently verified data, measurement data at home. So have one of those. Have it built around. And it even looks really impressive if this is a tech conference, so you set that on the desk or the kitchen table, whatever, where you're doing your listing presentation, but you'll look pretty cool. You're going to want to have a pencil, ruler, graph paper, and camera. So when you're starting, we always recommend to our guys, you start at the inside of the front door and you always work your way around to the right. So if this were the front door, you measure to that wall, quickly jot it down on the graph paper, and just keep going around. And if you do it right, you should wind up right where you started. If you didn't, scrap it, start over again. And that's the way you do it. So you click your travel point, you go clockwise or counterclockwise, you measure every wall, you set it on graph paper, and then you set a scale. So that's why graph paper is nice, because each square has its own scale, so you can scale it out. And then you proceed to refine it. You probably do it 3, 4, 5 times, because your first time you'll probably, that's where you started, but you'll wind up down there. And second time might wind up there, third time, but eventually, as you tighten up your measurements and things, you'll have it all fit, and now you've got a great floor plan. And then, what you're going to want to do is every space you go in, you're going to want to document with photos, because it's incredible when it's great if you're sitting at your own kitchen table and then you run back upstairs. Where was that window? Take pictures of the space, just so you've got photographic documentation of this is what that looked like, this is what that looked like, so that as you're building in windows and doorways, which way did the door open? You've got reference information. Then what you can do is there's computer software that will allow you to go and tidy it up, pretty it up, make everything shiny. And then you start to include, again, those 5 things that protect yourself. What is my unit of measurement? What measurement am I giving? Who measured this space? When was it measured? All that wonderful stuff. And then you can also find all that information online. So I'll go back to this one. What you need to know to protect yourself from square footage. And that, for the most part, like that's really the Coles Notes version. It's not complicated. I really could spend a lot more time going through a lot of the details. Oftentimes we find that there are questions about square footage and floor area, but that's really it. If you understand those 5 things, when the board does roll this out, or even if you want to get ahead of the curve and start promoting that I'm going to get this information even before it becomes mandatory, it is something that is coming. You are a buyer-driven industry, and the buyers are demanding this all over the world. North America really is the last one to provide this information, and it's coming. But it's something to embrace. It certainly sets you apart. We hear a lot of things about setting your professional standards up against for sale by owner properties. It's a great thing to do. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm confused about this clockwise. What about closets and all that?
Well, if you walk into a closet, you should be able to walk back out.
Well, maybe not in some people's homes. So you just go around the house and go in and out of the closets and...
Yep.
Okay,
That's why you've got to try it. It should work.
I'll try it.
If not, you've got a lot of descriptions you need to put in your disclosure document.
But seriously, I mean, some people's closets, you wouldn't be able to get into them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yep. And again, if you photograph it, there's a certain amount of logic that you will apply because you're drawing it as you go. So you'll be able to place everything together. And because you're measuring every time, every new direction you go, you are creating a map.
Okay, so one more question then. You're in the bathroom.
Into the shower and back out.
Pardon?
Into the shower and back out.
All right.
Yes, sir.
How about two-story, like an atrium airspace house?
That's an interesting one.
Hear it. What did he say? I didn't hear.
Oh, the question was about are you two-story?
Foyer in a two-story house
Yes.
with no floor on the second floor.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes where even property tax records, they don't account for any of that. That is not square footage. So that open area is not floor space. It's floor space on the first floor, but it's not floor space on the second.
I've had that argument with an impact assessor, and I lost it.
Oh, absolutely. We have some great ones with MPAC. I've been asked to leave their booth a few times. But the one comforting comment they did say is because it's about collecting taxes. I mean, that's why they do it. And they said, fine, you might be right in square footage, but at the end of the day, we're going to get what we want out of you. We'll just raise your assessment. So, yeah, they don't account for that. They can't account for garages. And this is the difference between them and they can get you in either way. Garages are not considered to be part of the square footage of a home. Well, oftentimes, if you've got something built in the 60s to early 80s where the garage was actually inset inside the home and there was perhaps a breezeway behind as part of the house, they don't know how deep that garage goes. So they guess. And guess what? It's in their best interest to guess a bigger size home. You know why everybody always says, well, their number's bigger? Yeah, because they get to charge you for it. That's why their number will always be bigger. They get to kick their measuring tape out. We don't.
So covered porches are not considered square footage?
Not in North America.
What about three-season?
Three-season rooms are not, no. It's got to be four-season, part of the HVAC. Now, if you move to Australia, a balcony is, because there is no four seasons, there's one. But, and even down south, southern United States.
What was that reference to HVAC?
Well, if it's part of the HVAC system and all under the centralized heating, air conditioning, all that system, you do have an argument that that would be part of. So if you had a sunroom that was completely contained, and you could show evidence of maybe there's centralized heating, not outboard electrical heating, but it's part of the centralized home system, you could argue that that is square footage.
So if it had a heated floor, it wouldn't be counted as square footage
No.
because it's not part of the HVAC.
Yeah.
What about an indoor pool?
Oh, definitely. Well, not definitely. The ones that I've seen, yeah, because they all fall under the roof line. If it is an external structure built onto the house so that you've got some additional seasonality out of it, maybe it's a screen porchway like a Florida lanai, that's not considered square footage. But if it is properly, I'm talking an 11,000 square foot house, it has a complete indoor pool under the main roof line, yes, that is part of the square footage. Yes, sir.
If a fella makes his garage into a man cave, has it heated through the ductwork, polishes up the floor, but he can still park cars in it? Where's the fine line there?
You could be, I believe the rule would be not, but that's something, again, you can put in there in your information. And again, by having the floor plan, you can show the space and say, I've got an additional X amount of square footage. Like, even for you folks, you hear a lot that, and we get this all over, and it's brilliant because it doesn't matter whether you're in sunny Los Angeles or Woodstock. People say, well, it's a 3-bedroom house. How does it feel? The square footage, it is about feel, but the square footage is that number that people want to compare to. It's if you can say that, look, I've got an extra 300 square feet in a man cave that's a converted garage, I'd certainly disclose it, but I wouldn't try and tuck it into a number that could get you into trouble. You can share that information without trying to bury it or boost your number up a bit. Nobody's asked about ranch bungalows. Everywhere I go in Canada, everybody asks about ranch bungalows. Were you going to ask about? Okay. Because the question is, well, what if I have a walkout basement or a beautifully finished basement? That is still not part of your square footage calculation. But again, if you floor plan it and you disclose that I've got 500 square feet of finished area at roughly $85 a square foot, and there's this amount of additional value in the home, but you can't add that as part of your square footage calculation. It's simply not part of the number. And a lot of folks like to tuck that in particular. Toronto's horrible for this, where you've got a lot of people in some of these older neighborhoods excavating the basements to make them 8 feet living space. They tuck that number in. That number doesn't belong there. Yes, you spent a lot of money to do it, but that is not part of your square footage calculation.
But you can say it's fully finished.
Fully finished, include pictures, do a floor plan of it. Like, you can sell it, but know what you're selling. Don't pretend it's something it's not.
So a raised ranch into the walk-in.
Yeah.
What if it doesn't have a walk-in? If it's just a regular basement with walk-in?
There are two prevailing rules of thumb. It's
No, but if it's got the bigger windows, the egress windows,
yep.
any different?
No. There's
Below grade.
yeah. There's two, depending on which standard that you use. There's the 1/2 rule or 2/3 rule. If more than 2/3 of the wall are below grade, for more than 2/3 of the perimeter of the home, it's below grade. That 1/2. With the province of Alberta, they have mandated, look, if any of it's below grade, it's below grade. And that is really the number one topic, that why there's 6 different standards that can't get along and distinguish on that particular one. We get that on the West Coast, where half the homes are built into the side of mountains where they've got a full floor of living space. In some cases, you're selling a house that has nothing above grade. So it becomes a challenge. So there's always lots of exceptions, lots of the really interesting stories. Everybody's in here probably knows of that one agent that had an issue around their square footage number, where you find yourself in a bit of a pickle. But at the end of the day, if it is those 5 things that you know about your number, and when you're disclosing it, and you're forthright with it. I know that's the method of measurement, and I had a conversation with the gentleman, he was here, earlier, where in the case of disputes over square footage, it's not so much about the number you're providing, it's what's in your number and how did you arrive at it. So in the case, has anyone been involved in a construction litigation case, or no? Good for you folks. Then you don't need me.
One more question.
Sure.
What about lofts, open area lofts? And I mean, it's just got let's say it's got a 2 foot, 3 foot knee wall around. Is that considered, do you consider that whole floor space square footage?
Not all of it. Again,
Just where you can stand?
it's somewhere between 40 and 48 inches, depending on, I think we use, Chris, are we to 40 inches? 5 feet. So our standard is, and we subscribe to the American National Standard, it's square footage up until the wall is no longer 5 feet high. And at that point, it's no longer considered livable space or square footage.
So that would affect a lot of story-and-a-half homes.
It absolutely would.
And, I mean, you know, the older neighborhoods, a lot of them.
We're dealing with, and that's a challenge with square footage, and that's a challenge with disclosing this information, and why it's valuable for you as a realtor to disclose more than less, because it's actually in your benefit. For MPAC to be able to give one number, they don't care, but for you, you know, you might have a story and a half where you want to show the floor plan of, look, you've got this lovely open loft space. Sure, 3 feet, 4 feet are below ceiling height, but it's still a great space. So a floor plan actually works in your favor as opposed to against. So the square footage really becomes, it really is more of the scientific and the comparison number, but with all the other information, and that's to get back to the disclosure aspect. If you show them and tell them what you measured, how you measured it, how I arrived at this number I've got, and you back it up with a floor plan, that's why buyers, number 2 reason why buyers buy new home versus existing, for the floor plan. They like to be able to map on the floor plan. So again, it becomes something, if you have that floor plan, you've got more dialogue, you've got more to talk about.
Your system there, does it, in the kitchen you married, would it measure to the front of the cabinet or to the back splash?
Back wall. Yeah. If you can turn a house upside down and shake it, and if it can fall out, no matter how well it's constructed, it's not structural. So we measure structural space.
So on a story and a half house, your floor plan, does that show only to the 5 foot mark on the upper?
Well, what we would show is, on our floor plans, we map the entire space, but then we've got mapped space, which is actually the floor plan, and then we've got measured space. So we distinguish by color in terms of what is considered square footage. So we might show an extra 3 feet of clear white space inside something that is set in yellow. That yellow area is to the 5 foot mark. So when you're given the floor plan, the buyer might say, well, what's this 3 feet on the outside? Well, it's below 5 feet. So you've got this much of above 5 feet, and you've got a few feet that are below 5 feet. And whether it's us or the 48 inches or 43 inches, that is generally accepted standard across North America, is you can't include the whole space. But to your benefit, if it's inset within the building, odds are MPAC didn't measure it either, because they can't get up there and see. So you're going to have bonus square footage regardless in most cases.
So we're going to change a story and a half to a story and a third.
Or 2/3. How was that? Was that okay? Did you learn something? Okay. Well, our guys are going to be over at the booth. If you have any more questions, I'll be there for a bit too. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.